we now have the privilege to hear the nation's popular political analyst. His views, comments, and remarks on President Obama's State of the Union speech.
Yes, hi sir, how you doing? First, thank you for giving me the opportunity of regalvanizing the State of the Union address and the speech, which was very important for most Americans. Was viewed, there was just a survey that was viewed by over 13 billion people globally. Now, the first thing he was talking about, which is concerning most of Americans, is the economy. Now, looking at the economy on a whole, we have to realize that the new galvanization of work job forces is more constitutionalized of values of fight and peace from beginning of weeks and hours of work for restoration purposes of losing jobs and people going for job elimination. Then the second thing he was saying, which is very important for Americans, is the fight against terror. Now, if you look at the fight against terror, an investigation was just formed that the same shoe that was used on the plane for the shoe bomber is the shoe that was thrown on President Bush. Now, I'm not 100% sure that it's correct, but on a whole fight piece, and we believe that we should get the held on people on the plane and people going through security measures and airports and pat-downs. Then,
did he mention on the Homeland Security reform?
Yes. Homeland Security reform, he was saying about the Black Monday and the stock market as a nation in one, and yes we can, and yes we do. Why? People want to know why it's either depression or recession in the economy of California and in the southern countries, we see that we have lights even from the light, and people that come back from the boats from China don't have the restoration of bringing in so many cars from India and Tokyo because they have the problem with the brakes. Now, after September 11, we didn't see so many democracy because we reduced more hypocrisy from government offices, and more people had values of Galvachisen I think in organization happiness from 1 to 10 Americans, but only on the older people because the baby boomers were more into global warming, and he said he will make it very clearly a global warning against terror. And he said, like Bush said, it's either you're with us or against us, because if not, they can bring the whole fight together from what's his name, Bin Laden, because of security threats from overseas, and get more reorganized and flight the heat the whole from either Manhattan or big countries like big cities all over.
So I do not exactly understand. Now, how would you rate our president's fight against terror?
Well, first and foremost, he promised that by 2083, 80% of Americans will have a train station next to their house, which means that if you're called to California for a funeral of your great uncle, we will go against the wind, and we will go so quick that you will make it there before you even die. That's very important for more Americans. Then you want to look at go green and term limits, and especially with the Florida Everglades and the fight, because locally and nationally more people are getting involved in international, and people are saying we don't want to give up because they should get more unified and galvanized all over the global financing. Looking at the part where he's talking about Suez Canal, root canals, people are going through a lot of pain, especially in the Middle East, because government and bank bailouts are not coming from the Sputnik area, and taxpayers are suffering because of that. But for this, he got a standing ovation of over 35 seconds.
So do you agree with his healthcare reform?
Okay, the healthcare reform of 65% of older Americans get re-healtherized by the organization department from Biden Health. But the younger people, if they go for flu shots in doctors' offices, they don't get Biden because nurses don't have more education on from filing processing. And people who come out as nurses or CNAs or paramedics or physician assistants have more involvement with scrutinization of financial stress and determinizing the standardization department. I don't think so.
So, and exactly when Obama promised in his election campaign about change, how do you see him doing any change?
Well, for the rich or the poor, the middle income, I believe it restabilizes the presidency, because President Putin or Gorbachev still promised him that they won't have all these fighting people from overseas, because overseas they don't get the Maltese from behind. So if you more Americans get it before, because if you Srpkanize it.
Hold that thought for a moment, please, because I must interrupt this session for a commercial break.
All right, we should take a commercial break and we will be back.
We will be back. Don't touch that dial.
Okay, stay on channel 5.
Did you follow along with the recent visit of Israel's Prime Minister Moshe Dayan as he visited the White House with President Obama?
Yes, the way he was looking at it, I mean, Moshe Dayan only had one eye, so he was looking at it in a different eye, but a different view. But we were believing that millions of Americans will have the ability of Snivish and glamorized by the lantern of Starhouse, because coming from the Middle East, Moshe Dayan was more involved in Calvinizing armies and based out of air forces and Strathaus from Oberluft airplanes and aircrafts overseas, and rebombing the nations of like Iraq and Iran to remobilize situations like Fayetteville. And frankly, yes, I think they did great. I mean, I think there was a great handshake and great friendship, and they are a friend of, and yes, definitely.
Did he bring up at the State of the Union address the recent achievements in the Middle East peace process?
Well, he did promise stimulus packages, remobilize and infrastructure Congress and Senate for remobilizing all the communities from fighters, because I don't think that the economic expansion can get Faradayized from the Middle East, because the main concern of Americans is infrastructure, and like you said, every police officer, firefighter, or EMT, or first responder will have new equipment to get reilified from EMTs in office, because last time we had emergencies, most people couldn't carry for Houston, especially when we had a snowstorm, and some people were saying that Obama and Bloomberg were involved in re-scrutinizing the streets and getting file fees from local offices and governors.
So in any way, would you blame either the President or Senate or Congress on the recent snow blizzard?
Well, look at the housing bubble, at the healthcare and political system gridlocks. Every time the mayor or the president is here in the city, they become gridlocked, and people are complaining from recalmanized the situations from China or from other places. It doesn't look too good when you have people coming from all over, and it gets crushed together as a whole, because if it's not making sense. When you crush the numbers, it's not doing it. Unless he's going to redo the emphasize. And especially, China is not waiting, nobody's waiting, and we believe in green energy, and we have to reconcile and in re-innovation and private sector, especially downsizing and remobilizing the whole fight systems from accessories and alpha.
As the President said, we should not accept the United States should be at second place.
Definitely, especially when it comes to global economy, leading refueling, and America must be number one, from exportation, nationalism, conversation, and rehaftanization and fighting. Because if you look at the NASA laws and the rules for MITES, it doesn't make sense to give all these fighting for other countries and bring in. We should have the export and give the Chayzefli from all together from the Gessen. And how many how many nations and other parties and cities have the 99-cent stores that they can get all the fat from China, from Liesendai?
Would you say the shooting in Arizona would have anything to do with the economy?
Well, looking at right now, we're having a status quo because too many young Americans are not being responsible for reorganizing from the bottom up, because it gets filed and decent. If you look at it in a different way from filing department, it doesn't make sense, and more people are saying that it has to get filed decent and government, and it has to be from reducing deficit.
When they were talking about fighting decent by reducing the deficit, that's when he brought up the new space shuttle program.
That's why we're looking at spending, budget cuts, surpluses, and jeopardizing stim limits and Volkheiten. Because funds fight doesn't have the fight if you listen. Because you can't fund it from bailout package and stimulus. And more banks were stimulated by other countries from stimulations departments.
I must interrupt you now for a short commercial break.
Okay, thank you.
So as the entire nation was up with the recent elections in Williamsburg, do you think that his promise of the dexabiotic powerful formula was designed to treat and prevent ear infections?
No, I believe that the bike lanes were reconstructed for teaching purposes, because they just did a survey that 90% of that area in Brooklyn are re-bikenizing the situations. Now, if you divide the cars and the bikes, people get to work. There's three ways: either go by train, by bike, or by bus, or by car. So the pollution part of it, if you get demonetized from fighting, you have the car gas and the pollution, and to every bike installation, percentage-wise, it has more for the pollution.
But to that point, he was talking about the defense system should be or will be effective in combating strep throat infections.
That's why, for years, if you've seen people going to the corners with the pickup truck and picking up day laborers, okay, what were they picking up? Demolition guys, painters, and handiwork. Lately, the economy have gotten so bad that I've seen a guy in a pickup truck, and he stopped and asked, you know what? I'm looking for 2 doctors, 3 lawyers, and 4 accountants. And you know what? People well dressed in suits and ties jumped into his back of his truck, and they were sitting there. So the economy is coming to restabilization. So it's about time to restuff the overflow of strimes and schlifters. And I believe that the recklessness of the flouters can re-empathize the sanctions of Descentrise. And Blitzenfall, and for term limits, he has to redefine the word calamize. Because if you read Usafighten, it can't get into healthcare and build systems and infrastructure.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the Senate and Congress, when they passed a bill which has proven to be highly effective in zinc lozenges by echinacea.
That's only in the 90s. In the 90s, they had reduced the leading phenology. They said the leading phenology of the top of the throat was on top of the trophofighten because they couldn't have it in the suit. In the 70s, they were re-amponizing the fight, and they did a survey that over global Iverson, 70% had the fight before. So they couldn't do it because the strufenite helped before it fights. And now in 2000, they had to do it, but it comes from taxpayers' money. Why should Americans suffer, especially middle class and the poor?
So how did he explain that will help him shorten the duration on foreclosures and short sales?
So he said that he will restabilize it. Presidents like Putin and Gorbachev that promised him to restabilize the nation and to reform the fight from before and to build it from a ground up, so we don't have ground zero and Calvinite before train seat. And they don't have funerals in the fighting city, and promotions and repartisanizing, and they believe that bipartisanship should get more appropriate than fighting for Americans, and global warming, either democracy or hypocrisy. from global fights, and all the Republicans, they should get visas and go green. If not, they couldn't have restarted the fight from the beginning. It has to remove eyes, and when they did the incinerator, it wasn't caffeine from the fish. Because they said that the incinerator will re-incinerate over 20% of the garbage. They can reduce it fight in New York, and they have to bring it out from oceans up front to bring the fight, release the fight.
Do you agree with his alphabetically arranged confidence that your shopping list?
Yes, definitely, because it's unified and keyfied, so it has to get rebound from subjects and government spendings, and it could get nationalized if you look at it from before, because before he started, he should have gotten a standing ovation for all this combination of tax cuts and reducing population from populations, and he says that the decision is the democracy of bipartisan alliance.
So you agree that elected officials have the right
Only
to verify all the information on the amount and grocery of purchases that will be published in a further issue?
Only if you believe in term limits. And the term limits were reduced by governments and people that were sitting in the Senate and departments. They should have thought about it before they went into law. And the way they look at it, to reform and restabilize it, it can be nationalized. Because it has to stand status quo. If not, we has to need for that, and more stuff will be brought in from China to re-empanize the title.
Because as I've seen recently, they very much criticized Paroi in the Kedai raffle, which with a lot of illegible entries that were disqualified.
Let me tell you something. To get this guy Paroi that's holding up that car, I was looking at it. There's no way he's holding that car alone. A car weighs much too much. And I know that guy. He cannot hold a car. He's good with Weinstock's auction and stuff like that. The housing bubble we has to get tonight. And recklessness over and over again, they have to rely from Tyson. And if you believe and giving up, they saying don't give up and re-alphanize the dues. College graduates should know that we have to emphasize, from the bottom up, and grade should be more than 90. And he claims that more graduates had refiled the season because in mathematics and arithmetic they had they governized the title.
When you mentioned just before about the day laborers, do you disagree with his immigration reform?
Well, I've seen it advertised in this weekly paper, the Voch. We've seen Rabbi Gluck, we've seen Oldefeit, and they have reduced the housing committee to restabilize the nation with people who were having mortgage bubbles and restabilization of housing, like loan modification, infrastructure, and fires. And more people who got the mortgage fight overdid the mobilistic forces.
And the reference information on the sales organizations?
No, they couldn't do that, because if you gridlock the fight in the force, you get youngsters get involved in violence. So either you have the voting, and then when you had in Florida, if you remember, they had the pregnant ballots and reduced deficit. We have to re-Almanize the deficit, and we have the Kusen straight, all the phone above, to get formalized and to stranger nicety from police officers and people and firefighters.
And on covered devices where Samsung had the slider grin handset
No, because Samsung didn't have the grin hats from Philison. More people from the government should get involved, reorganize Grafen, and have the emphasis based around the new technology of the finance.
But it had satisfied customers in applicable states.
Not in the last survey. And the last survey is saying reorganized 90% of items. Rafinets came back as reorganized customers that had organized the fighting. And if you have a problem with phones, yes, you come into Big Man Cellular, you have these new phones, and they couldn't do it because.
Can I see? Can you show them?
Yes, you have these two phones, and you can recalculate the organizers from the bills, and especially the new phones with the Android, and they have the new technology that at the push of the button, they promise they will have the whole fight together, that they can reorganize and reboot the system from the Bafad Nissen.
Was the new bill signed on Big Man Cellular?
I'm not sure. They're just going through the first thing of paper, but the hypocrisy is definitely holding back the old fight from Or and the beginning from time. But the mainstream is the menu of frozen items, and get the whole fight from the railroads of here.
And about the shipment of cellular phones from Big Man Cellular, did that have anything to do in the
Well, let me tell you
rescue at
something.
the terror in Moscow's airport?
Well, if Obama is right, and we will have the railroad that will go straight from Chicago to China, things will be able to get much quicker from China, especially all the accessories that come from China, has to be reduced. The 2.3 power outage that gives out the phone and it re-alpinizes the phone. So you can have more quality of life because people
Excuse me, I'm
Go
not
ahead.
confused. We're discussing the terror in Moscow's airport, the terror attack. I'm really confused, but we have to pause now for a break for a commercial.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, sir. We're back.
Yes.
Now, as he incorporates the safe port to protect your holder and retractable. Excuse me, are
Well-
you with me?
Well, to be first of all, we need what he was talking about is rain dates. Okay, you need rain dates for bleachers and dynamite. You have barbecues, 4Cs, cars, trucks. So we need to redigitalize scrutiny of flybus. So we have shopping sprees, and it should get put a hold for Steibelhaft because we have cookware packages and pomegranate discovery of Nintendo Panorama. I believe it's enough to see portable backups compromise the filter. And if you're drilling oil mines, the ultimate adjustment is to integrate functionality.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I disagree because the Madison Premium experience does not come with a premium price tag.
But if you look at the purpose of flounder bowls, okay, the flexibility to extend GoFlex to encrypt files is statistic perpolution of fund gates. And yes, you're looking at me. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. This is to strengthen the American dream. And that's where we get a standing ovation. To restabilize housing fighting.
And how would that be?
get-
How will that minimize duplicating of fax services?
Well, if you build from the bottom up and you get an infrastructure, you have the stability of American dream, so we can reboost the fighting thief from upstate. And you don't have to go there. More Americans will have it. You can do it. You too. Yes. I don't see why there's a problem where Americans have gas station problems and rebuilding nations are fighting for.
That was the argument when he came up with the wireless combo on the keyboard featuring the comfortably controllable.
But if it takes off people from taxpayers' money, and you can't talk about tax cuts and get richer middle abducing government and bank bailouts. Because the root canal is the main root of one nation. And this is where we stand as a nation and a congressional nation to rebuild Amphanizen from ground zero. Build up and make it fighting and make it happen. More Americans want to see young Americans, college graduates, and people like doctors, lawyers, everybody wants to come together and get hypernectinized.
As the vice president mentioned, they should put more emphasis on to customize a program for an applicational solutions.
We can't give up in bipartisan. We have to partners, apprens, and get involved in split fights and get the stock market to rehabilitate Americans to will have ability and get from responsibilities and infrastructure the roads.
Explain what you just said about optimization to increase the traffic flow.
Well, if you're looking at traffic, traffic is a big problem where Americans are increasing because every day baby boomers are starting to drive cars. So if you have a problem with traffic, you have to de-ironize relays and get highways 6 and 8 lanes.
Sorry.
You have to
Those are your own
renazalize.
thoughts and those are your own sentiments.
No, not if you got flybys. If you go on streets and cars, roads are not lit, then you have Aldi's, and when you back up, you can reverse the whole fighting from the motor. And it doesn't have to get upgraded because younger Americans have it from healthcare.
But by providing the names and use of these telemarketers,
No,
since
not when you're funding status from the, and especially I believe they should have status quo and get the American fight all up in these Nirana.
and how would they retain their independence?
Because if you infiltrate in front of a government and a Congress, you work together, you can rehabilitate, remobilize, and get developed and develop a new organ fighting. It's not strategy, because if you're looking at the views and strategies and reutilizing more of it, you can get morphinized and bailout funds from governments and September 11 funding.
Will that compromise our security of a complete and extensive
Not
selection?
now, because now we have the global warming. Look what's going on outside with the global warming busted. Now they have to reinvest billions of dollars and re-get the fight and see why it's going through the green ozone and get the layer re-alpinized, because on the top of the equator you have to letnize it.
We've seen a drop in sales in luxurious Hungarian down comforters
You're
and
right,
pillows.
You're right, but not as a whole. If you're looking at Shoppers and Macy's and big companies, they don't have national recognized Americans do the nation fart, at least from the beginning, because restitution and confinancing doesn't have downsizing and private sector. I don't see the innovation of resignation. Global economy and exportation must be a national competition and have recognized from the bottom up, especially if you want to redo expansions and get put a hold on car fightings and loan holes. And if you have strafos, you can revitalize the whole economy and get the stock market, and you can prevent a Black Friday or get a destructive cycle in foreign policy.
Would that expedite the processing and conversion of short sales?
Not if you reduce the bank loans, because now that we work on a 000 modification loan, you can't have people going in where people are paying 10% and 7% and tell them that they have to redo the loan for modification reasons. Because if you divide the income and the expenses, you can't have it felonized.
And how would that improve establishments on merchants of lodging industry?
Well, it depends how many people. If you look at more people using credit card and going into debt and working in a minus, you have to re-give the key card benefits and expedite the file. The more files are being expedited, the more they have the democracy and the economy, and the more it has infinite merchandise. And if you believe in a greater America and a greater country, it's all about friendship, policy, and reorganizing a nation of the Malice.
As now they're importing from China, as you said, business machines with foreign language typewriters.
No.
And electronic translators.
But Obama promised that we will have more export in right now. If you look at the economy, okay, we owe Chinese people $10 trillion. The promise of our president is that in 2083, which is around the corner, China will owe us $85 trillion, and we will work for $1 a week, and they'll be driving around in these big Lexuses and gas guzzlers. That's why we can have the Chicago-based railroads up and running for greater Americans, rebuild nations, and give millions and millions a job. And this is where he got another round of applause for his wife, Michelle.
Will the American population be more confident and completely satisfied about the sophisticated network infrastructure?
No, because the political system doesn't work in bubbleizing the fighting. Because if you have restabilization of economy and leading refueling, they don't have Americans, because Americans must believe in rebuild one and get Faudernaus and
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We are late for another commercial break. Thank you. We are back now on the air, and as we mentioned before, in the election campaign of Palladino, and was mentioning sustaining the American dream of the deficit in the economic innovations.
Well, he did. The president did touch the issue of American paychecks and the distress of tranches of clients. If you're re-Felbenizing of the re-stumbling and the downtown destructions of neighborhood and businesses, of founding and growth flound and instituting greater research to decompute universities and decline coverage of changes, we cannot re-Feldenize, and that's why centuries of pioneers and images can still get the promise of Abraham Lincoln. If we innovate education, like Thomas Edison and breakthroughs, satellite will be them and get to the moon, because together we can build it up, and we will. Yes, that's what he was saying, and re-emphasizing 20 times, that the factory unused manufacturing of Brustling and Apollo is redeveloping 1 million electric vehicles for the future of Americans. So we can decompose in a phyllis and to get it overnight, and to get the generations of 10 years in fighting, because kids are falling back. So now he's saying that the education of our kids is the top of 10 years, and General is getting citizen and classrooms more of TVs and hard-washing, decolonizing fabrics. And to revoke this, 40 states can reflexionize possibilities and remain reptronized of over own country and defalonize the team.
When they defalonized the NASA and the Pentagon on the solar shingles on Iran's nuclear reactor, withholding the research and institutions.
I don't think so, because they innovated the breakthroughs of satellite, and we said that we will beat them to the moon. And that's why we had the stability of more Americans, and we have to, and that's what he said. Yes, we have to, and we will. De-stress, and at the last, go ahead.
I have to disagree on that, because on the occasional promotion when investing in research and new technologies, he didn't mention that, as you just said.
Because by the last elections, when you asked me about Palladino, they didn't Paladinize the campaign, and more people were Feldmanizing, the restumbling in fact. And if you look at the centuries of coverage, they don't have Groslaus, and they can reduce the foul.
And how will Groslaus inform the business write-off on the private sector?
Not if you re-educate the kids of over-revoking states of flex line and deformatize the powerhouse of Filbanizing from more companies, and get childhood and declining our town and rival. And especially if you're revoking the states, you do remain reputing our own rival gas mask from bombing sites.
Do you believe in competition for jobs would prosper for entrepreneurs?
Definitely, because if you re-empanize the entrepreneurs, and you do infrastructure the infrastructure of political systems, you do gridlock the decisions of redefining democracy and hypocrisy from 1 to 10 Americans, to patronize and approve overall stability of Starhouse and Fencelized. Because global warming doesn't get financed from bipartisanship. The Florida Everglades, like I said before, redo nationally notionalized, and we gets the fold from the files together, and they can foldinize from the convergence.
Will Microsoft on Dell systems do more business in more places?
Yes, young Americans do see competition and national exploitation, because we as Americans, we want to see more export, and to get defiled from China, and to get the economic explosion, to get the expansion of explanations, to get more technology, to get felinized and refueling corporations and competition, to get status quo of responsibilities of shoe bombers.
Then we do have to memorize the equations that immigrants have risked.
Not on a national level, because if you do national compromise, you can't have Feldman Finit, because fund gates don't start limits overall to get Congress and Senate to push through the fillability of tax cuts and middle income. Yes, you heard me right. Do stability and get rehousing. Don't take it for nothing. De-reputize and get the refund is the main thing of American dream that Abraham Lincoln promised us. Reunite and get the fires, and together we can dream that we have the first dream of Thomas Edison, where we had the lights before we had straw hats and galifiches.
I remember when Noach Deer had pre-configured the fast-track Vostro.
That's why Dovhike and Greenfeld had Tsongas reboot the fetal system from Elpinize and get the structure system to get ballots and votes of different zip codes to straighten it out by bailout, and get government bailout to redecline images of more exposed innovation and recognition of private sector, especially downsizing and get together and form job finding and get security of Leichtenfeld and immunization universities, declining or coverages in 10 years. Because Americans don't believe in future and getting fired this eve from before. Listen, if it doesn't come up, the surveys of Promisine.
I didn't get what he tried to explain on the genuine, productive reliability that you need for specialized IT staff.
Well, yes, you're right, but if you listen well, you can see that the promise that he said will get more rebubbleized before you build a feet, before the people got to the Sputnik and they got up to the moon, because they promised that they will get downtown neighborhoods and rebuilding Americans to get car services from taxis and the fees over the bridge and undermining tunnels, from hypocrisy and pardonization of pioneers to see fentanize and get re-stumbling of refordising, especially for people who are not getting the mainstream of Faisen.
So in these people with their mainstream Faisen, I guess we cannot expect to have them the created optiplex on the networked environments.
No, because if you reblossel the file, you can get manufacturing more economy fees if you get it 60 per minute and you have greater estimation and get research of countries, and that's why we believe that we have presidents like for people from Putin and Gorbachev from China have training in America to get situation and final fees and funeralize the democracy of Go Green and republicize the Birham and Falhus and get together, and together we can do it. And we believe that yes, this is the American dream, and we want to strengthen the American dream. And I believe that was the close of this session, to get every little child to get the strengthenized and refarbonized strategy of reutilized future and ability of get striving.
About the economy, when we have our competitors and harnesses of the speed and the power through demanding graphics.
No. He didn't. He said it, but what he meant to say before he got the round of applause the 30th time, to reblosselize and get philosophies from Ein and rebuilding together to get the young Americans re-electorize the families of presidency and to have more people involved in rainbows and get philosophy strategy in the field. And that's what I believe that will strengthen the American dream, and we will see a better future for Americans. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Just one more question. Will that improve the benefits and the systems of the popular pre-configured Dell models?
No.
To processor of a family?
No, because if you reprocess the family, you have to do the interfry to get more Belgians of house bubbles and health, because as we're standing now, we're in a status quo of explanation and re-dembolize.
I must interrupt you. Our time is up and we have to go on to the next program. But thank you very much for your views. And
we will, yes, as he said, we will reprogram and decipher. And as he said, God bless you and thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Listen to it again. You'll see what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you.